They treated him like he was just another passenger until someone whispered his name. Within minutes, the entire airport froze, and the airline president was racing to make it right. What had they done? And who exactly had they insulted? It was an ordinary morning at JFK Airport. Passengers moved in long lines, dragging luggage and sipping coffee, lost in the routine of travel. Among the crowd stood an older man, quiet, steady, dressed simply in jeans, boots, and a weathered jacket. Nothing about him drew attention, except the faded patch on his backpack, a small American flag, and a silver badge that had seen years. He arrived at gate 46, ticket in hand, and politely greeted the gate agent. She typed for a moment, then frowned. "Sir, you've been reassigned to seat to 7B in economy." He blinked, slightly confused. "I booked 3A in first class." She didn't look up. "It's overbooked. You've been downgraded." A brief silence, no apology, just a printed ticket. The man simply nodded, thanked her softly, and walked away. No complaints, no raised voice. As he passed through the gate, a young veteran in line noticed the badge clipped to the man's bag and froze. "Is that Medal of Honor?" he whispered to himself. The old man quietly took his seat in the last row, knees tight, shoulders straight. His hands rested on a small worn book, probably something he carried everywhere. The cabin bustled around him with people finding seats and overhead bins slamming shut. No one realized who he really was. But something about his calm, quiet presence seemed to hum with weight. He wasn't trying to make a point. He was simply there, but fate, and a few sharp eyes, were about to turn an unnoticed mistake into a national lesson. And within minutes, the world would know exactly who was sitting in seat to 7B and why no one should ever ignore a quiet hero. The plane was boarding quickly now. People settled into their seats, scrolling phones, adjusting bags, calling loved ones, but 3 rows ahead of the man into 7B. That young veteran from earlier couldn't stop staring. He had seen that medal once during training. It wasn't given easily, only to those who had done something beyond belief. He leaned over to the flight attendant. "Mum, I think that man back there. He's a Medal of Honor recipient." The attendant smiled politely. "Oh, do you know him personally?" He shook his head. "No, but I've read about him. His name is Master Sergeant Daniel Rains. He saved an entire unit in Afghanistan. Alone. That patch is real. You should check." The attendant, curious but doubtful, walked to the back. She glanced at the man, noted the badge and the quiet, formal posture. When she returned to the front, she whispered something to another crew member. Within moments, word quietly moved from one end of the cabin to the other. Whispers, surprised faces, passengers glancing back with new eyes. The man remained still, unaware that his name was circling the plane like wildfire. Up in the front, a senior flight officer radioed the gate. "Possible Medal of Honor recipient aboard. Confirm." The gate responded quickly, pulling up the original booking. "Daniel Rains, yes. Medal of Honor. Status, flagged for priority boarding." The mistake became clear instantly. Somehow, in the system shuffle, they had downgraded a national hero. And now, what was just an error in seat assignments had turned into a storm. Calls were made, messages forwarded, and then within exactly 8 minutes of boarding, a man in a dark suit stepped through the boarding door. No bag, no assistant, just a walkie-talkie. He didn't greet the crew. He looked straight to the back, eyes locked onto 7B. The cabin grew silent as the man in the suit made his way down the aisle. Passengers stopped mid-conversation, heads turning, sensing something important was happening. The suited man was no ordinary airline employee. His badge read David Langston, President, Skyfront Airlines. He reached row 27 and gently knelt beside the elderly man sitting there. "Master Sergeant Rains," he said softly, just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "On behalf of this airline and every person on this aircraft. I want to personally apologize." Daniel Rains looked up slowly, a bit surprised, his expression unreadable. "I didn't expect anything," he replied. The president nodded. "I know, and that's exactly why this matters. You weren't supposed to be here into 7B. You were scheduled for first class with full honors, and we failed to deliver that." A hush fell over the passengers nearby. One woman wiped her eye. Another man across the aisle started clapping gently. Others followed. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Rains gave a small smile, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I served. I didn't do it for perks." The president stood, voice clear now. "And that's why you deserve them. You didn't ask, but we remember." He turned to the flight crew. "Escort Master Sergeant Rains to 1A. Ensure he's comfortable. Then delay departure for 5 minutes. I'll be speaking to every passenger personally." Rains was helped to his feet as the clapping grew louder. Some passengers stood as he passed, tipping their heads, some saluting quietly. A mistake had been made, but how it was corrected, that changed everything. And in that moment, the plane wasn't just full of travelers anymore. It was filled with quiet respect, deep gratitude, and a man who had earned far more than a seat upgrade. Asterisk as Master Sergeant Rains settled into seat 1A, the cabin crew treated him with the kind of reverence usually reserved for dignitaries. A flight attendant gently offered him a warm towel, followed by a handwritten note from the pilot. "Your courage carried more weight than any plane will ever fly. Thank you for your service." Rains stared at it for a moment, then folded it neatly and tucked it into his coat pocket. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. For years, he'd kept a low profile, never boasting about the mission that earned him the Medal of Honor, never discussing the 3 lives he pulled from a burning vehicle under fire. He didn't think of himself as a hero, but now, sitting there with a blanket over his legs and a cup of black coffee in hand, he began to understand something. People still cared. People still remembered. Meanwhile, back in the main cabin, whispers filled the air. Passengers Googled his name. Articles popped up. Old footage surfaced. Grainy video of Rains carrying a wounded soldier on his back. Smoke and chaos all around. One teenager whispered to her mom, "He's in my history book." Her mom simply nodded, tears in her eyes. The president of the airline, true to his word, moved row by row, explaining the error, not deflecting blame. "Sometimes systems fail," he said, "but people don't have to." What could have been just another flight delay turned into something else entirely. A shared moment of reflection. Strangers exchanged glances. Conversations began. This wasn't just a story about a seating mistake anymore. It became a story about honor, humility, and how one man's quiet presence shifted the mood of 143 passengers cruising 30,000 feet above the ground. As the plane began its descent, the cabin had gone quiet not with boredom, but with reverence. The hum of the engines felt almost respectful. Master Sergeant Rains sat still, eyes closed, the pilot's note resting on his lap. He hadn't asked for any of this. He never wanted a spotlight. But today, it found him, and strangely, he didn't mind. As the wheels touched the runway, a subtle round of applause started near the front. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was heartfelt. One by one, passengers turned to look at him not as a celebrity, but as someone who had quietly done the unimaginable and never asked for a thank you. When the doors opened, the president of the airline stood at the front of the jet bridge, flanked by 2 flight captains and a gate agent holding a small bouquet of white roses. He stepped forward, extended his hand, and with genuine humility said, "Thank you for letting us correct our mistake. But more than that, thank you for who you are." Rains gave a quiet nod, shook the man's hand, and replied, "I was just doing my job." The president paused. "That's what makes you different." A young boy stepped out of the crowd with his mother. He had a toy soldier in one hand and nervous eyes. "Are you the real kind of hero?" he asked. Rains knelt down, placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder, and said, "A real hero is someone who does what's right when no one's watching." And with that, he walked away. No cameras, no parade, just quiet footsteps of a man who never wanted to be known, but left a whole plane full of people changed forever. Sometimes, the greatest stories are whispered, not shouted. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others. Subscribe to Hidden Brave for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard.